Ooh, look at that fresh white piece of watercolor paper. Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind Watercolor. Well, this is Canson Heritage hot press. Canson Heritage is great paper, and I'm going to be inking first. And I love this hot press paper for inking. It's great, gives you a nice crisp line. Here's my reference. Another nice historical shot. I've got two versions actually. One of them lightened and one of them darker. The darker one gives me the details in the highlights if I need them. And the lighter one gives me nice details in the shadows. Got a nice sort of dual light source, a strong window light and a reflected light. So that's a really great dynamic lighting situation. I love great light. There's a nice core shadow too coming down the center of the face. So more about core shadows later. But we get started drawing this one. I'm just dipping into my historical photo archive of pics I took last year at Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg. And I got a bunch of them. Lots more paintings in those photos, I think. But here's where it starts. I mean, this is where, especially with a portrait, you gotta have the drawing right. So I took my time. That's part of why I didn't get a video out last week. The other part was I had a bunch of administrative stuff I had to finish up on. Bookkeeping, taxes, blah, blah, blah. And I just took the opportunity to spend extra time on this piece and make it a nice video. But back to the drawing. Got to get it right. Got to get proportions right. Proportions and faces are so important. Dynamic light, I think, makes them even more interesting. And I do a little bit of shading, especially where the details matter. The center of interest matters. So you'll see that bit of shading. And as I shade, I'm thinking about how I'm going to do those values with ink. Just putting in the glasses here. And spending time with the drawing just helps you familiarize you with the subject and what you're going to be inking. And pencil can really even be sort of a dress rehearsal for some of the inking. So all the time I'm thinking about how will I ink this as I'm drawing? How will I ink this part? How will I ink that part? One of the challenges on the lenses and the glasses were the reflection. And there especially was a strong reflection on the left lens as her right lens. So I wanted to make sure that got in there. But once the proportions and everything are right, and I'm just working on the details, then it's just refining and thinking through the inking process. I'm not going for a likeness in this case. There was a bit of a likeness, but likenesses take a whole lot longer, I think, and I usually have to spend quite a bit of time drawing, looking at the drawing, a day later, revising, erasing. I mean, likenesses are tough. I didn't care about a likeness in this case. I just wanted a nice, convincing, proportionally correct portrait depicting this woman who was an excellent tour guide, by the way. We were touring the Governor's Palace in historical Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg. Those tour guides, I tell you, they know their stuff. As I got away from the center of the face, both in the scarf, this is what I started inking with, by the way. This is in that new pen sampler that I was trying out. This is the Uni pen, the .05. I'm starting with it because it's very fine. All the inking on this piece is going to be fairly delicate. Nothing real bold or black. And I usually start with things that are obvious, that like things like the glasses I know are going to be a line, dark areas, things like linear parts of the eyeball, I mean things like that. And then I work my way out into the more subtle shading. But I was just going to say about the tour guides, they really know their stuff. If you're anywhere near Colonial Williamsburg, you ought to go. because those people are good. Anyway, yeah, so just continuing to ink and line. That's a good way to get into a piece. Just lining and inking the parts you know will be line, or either that or will be dark. I try not to get too heavy with any line, even if I know later it might get heavier. I just like to bring everything along gradually. So like I do a lot of times, especially with portraits, I jump around. When you ink, don't forget that especially if you're doing a hatching technique like I'm doing, don't forget you're creating value and tone. Even with some lines, like shadow side of objects, the line can be heavier than the light side. You're trying to either depict value by your hatching or give the illusion of value with hatching. So in a face, especially one that's dynamically lit like this, value is crucial. Most of this will be sped up, but I try to give you a few instances of real time just so you can see the pace. If I did it all at that pace, it would be super, super tedious. Things like mouths. I see a lot of people that ink mouths like symbols or icons, and they're not really paying attention to the shapes of shadows. Things like eyes and eyelids and nose, the areas around the nose, especially the mouth, which is very complex. Got to look at it as a series of value shapes and almost completely divorce yourself from the shape of a mouth. I've switched to the larger 0.1 Copic, however you pronounce it. So again, just laying in tone over some of the darker areas. That little part to the left of her neck is going to be one of the darkest areas. But again, I'm bringing these values along gradually. Can always come back and deepen them. I'm also thinking as I ink, because this is a line and wash, can have a lot of color. I'm also thinking how much value the paint's going to carry. I want the deepest and mid-tones to more or less be carried by the ink hatching and just be strengthened by the watercolor. Now, if you'll notice what in the shadow, what seems like a line on the edge of the shadow going down the center of the face, that's called a core shadow. It's really a great thing to incorporate. It really rounds out your form. We'll talk about more of that later because my hand's covering it up. But the bonnet was going to be, well, the bonnet is white. It's white, so it doesn't have a lot of value in it. It will have some, and so it's not going to have a lot of hatching, just in a few places. So I'm treating it with mostly just outlines. And since it's away from the center of the face, the eyes, nose, and mouth area where I want the most detail, I can treat it a little more simply. Didn't realize my subject was out of frame while I was recording this. That happens sometimes. But there wasn't a whole lot of interesting detail below that scarf, so we'll get it recentered up here in just a minute. But now I'm starting to go back over hatching and add a little more detail, a little more value adjustment. Still working in those darkest little crevices and places, and now I'm starting to work in some of the more subtle shading. There will be a lot of shadow on her right side of her face to our left that will be defined by color. But notice that line going down the middle of the face that's defined by the shadow. That's called a core shadow. Core shadow is the darkest part of a shadow. To one side of it is usually your direct light source. To the other side of it is your reflected light source, and it usually will create a bit of a line, a soft line going down the center. Those are great to put in to round out a form. They really make your form look dimensional. And you're really seeing it accentuated here because I don't have any color in. And a lot of the shadow, a lot of the reflected light to our left is going to be done, as I said, with watercolor. Okay, time for the color. I wanted you to see how I'm pulling out flesh tones. All those reds down there, which is Pyrrole Scarlet, Pyrrole Red, going from left to right. Pyrrole Scarlet, Pyrrole Red, Quinacridone Rose, I think, Quinacridone Violet, and Cobalt Violet. And up there, I'm pulling out some Cobalt Blue, mixing in a little bit of purple with that, and some Quinacridone Gold, Indian Yellow over to the left of the palette. So all of those mix for great flesh tones. Caucasian flesh is a peachy color, but it shifts from yellowish to reddish depending on what part of the face. So I'm going to get fairly bold, loose, and washy here, but this is going to be very light, so I'm not worried. You'll see me pull out a spray bottle in a minute. Now you can see where I was talking about the shadow part of the face. I'm pulling in color there right away. Now we're going to get it really wet. Sorry for the glare, but I have to lift this and move it around. I brought in this Silver Brush Black Velvet as it's dry, just to pick up excess. But I'm laying down a very, very light tone, but I'm also wetting this whole area, so I'll be able to work this area very softly and diffusely for a while. Love this paper. It just worked out really great. Mixes of Quinacridone Violet, a little bit of Cobalt Violet. Just tilting the washes around, trying to see what they're doing. I wanted the wash to look like it just went right through the face. And then I was going to pull out some of the more distinct values later. So I didn't mind if this got loose, drippy, and patchy looking, because it's kind of dry, quite light. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I won't hold this level for long, so the glare will go away. Sometimes playing with washes on a pen and ink and a line and wash are the most fun, because you've established all the drawing and you're just filling in with color. You don't need to go as deep a lot of times with color. So it's just fun to see with a drawing that worked out and that finished. And I'm just about done with the base washes. They're still quite puddly. I'm leaving them that way on purpose, just so these colors will intermingle a little bit. And I'm just going to go back now and start picking up some of the excess puddle. At this point I was getting pretty excited, because I saw a base wash that I really loved and I thought was going to give me something good to build on. That just provides a bit of continuity, a bit of nice, interesting continuity from the background through your piece. I have to really hold myself back sometimes from doing too much at this stage. Still a bit of a puddle at the bottom, but a lot of the water is soaking in, so the washes don't move as much, and that's perfect. That's what I want. I want to be able to start dabbing in smaller areas, getting some red in here now to create some shadowy flesh tones. And I am paying close attention to the light values in my reference. So that's very, very important to me. At this stage it's further drying, but it's still all very damp. So when I'm dabbing in, it still is diffusing the paint a good bit, and that's perfect. That's what I need. I can start building value in those dark areas with the paint now. Now we're going to get some of the more warmer tones in there. This is where it starts to get really, really fun. Face just comes to life, I think, when you get those warmer flesh tones in there. I was really pleased too with how the core shadow really came to life. Just made that transmission of light seem all that more dynamic. Switching to a smaller quill now. This is a Da Vinci. This is a pure squirrel. It's very limp, but it's alright. It holds a lot of water. And it's got a nice point too, so I can go from some fairly detailed areas to some fairly broad washes if I need to. Gonna do some lifting just to enhance the highlights in the bonnet where it got a little dark. And some final highlights with a gel pen on the glasses. And here we go. This is a finished piece. After staring at it and tweaking it a little bit over a couple days. But really happy with it. Really happy with it. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you so much, patrons, for making this episode possible. You guys are the best, and we will see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.